Welcome back to the Badass Literature Society, where badasses come together to rate and review novels recommended by you. I'm Michael.
This is Barbara.
And I'm Lauren.
This month we read The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. It was recommended to us by a listener on Instagram at Books A World in Between. Thank you so much for the recommendation. Like always, we'll split the podcast into two sections, a spoiler-free discussion and our overall group score, and then a more in-depth discussion of the plot and the ending, which is obviously going to be spoiler-heavy, as well as our individual scores for the book. Before we do that, let's talk about the author. Neil Gaiman began his writing career in England as a journalist. His first book was a Duran Duran biography that took him 3 months to write, and his second was a biography of Douglas Adams, called Don't Panic, the official Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy Companion. Gaiman describes his early writing as, I was very, very good at taking a voice that already existed and parodying it or passageing it. Violent Cases was the first of many collaborations with Dave McKean. This early graphic novel led to their series Black Orchid, which ended up being published by DC Comics. The groundbreaking series Sandman followed, collecting a large number of U.S. awards in its 75-issue run, including 9 Will Eisner Comic Industry Awards and 3 Harvey Awards. In 1991, Sandman became the first comic ever to receive a literary award, the 1991 World Fantasy Award for Best Short Story. Neil Gaiman is credited with being one of the creators of modern comics, as well as an author whose work crosses genres, as well as reaches audiences of all ages. He is listed in the Dictionary of Literary Biography as one of the top 10 living postmodern writers, and is a prolific creator of works of prose, poetry, film, journalism, comics, song lyrics, and drama. Gaiman has achieved cult status and attracted increased media attention with recent profiles in The New Yorker and by CBS News Sunday Morning. And now Barbara's going to talk about some of the specifics about this book in particular.
Okay. It was originally published on June 18th of 2013. The genre are considered fantasy fiction and horror. It is about 181 pages, and it currently has a 4 out of 5 on Goodreads, a 4.4 out of 5 on Amazon, and a 4.1 on Barnes & Nobles. It was nominated for the following awards: the Nebula Award for Best Novel in 2013, the World Fantasy Award for Best Novel in 2014. Oh boy, how do we say this? Mythopoeic Fantasy nominee for adult literature in 2014, Goodreads Choice Award for Best of the Best in 2018, and it won the following awards: the Locus Award for Best Fantasy Novel in 2014, the Specsavers National Book for Book of the Year in 2013, and Goodreads Choice Award for Fantasy in 2013.
I think that's the longest list of awards we've had to date. Am I right about that?
It sounds like it.
Something like that. I think Cinder was a close second, too, because that was nominated for a lot of things as well. This one, I think, is the one that's won the most.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you, Barbara. Let's go over to Lauren for the back of the book.
Back of the book. Sussex, England. A middle-aged man returns to his childhood home to attend a funeral. Although the house he lived in is long gone, he is drawn to the farm at the end of the road where, when he was 7, he encountered a most remarkable girl, Letty Hempstock, and her mother and grandmother. He hasn't thought of Letty in decades, and yet, as he sits by the pond, a pond that she'd claimed was an ocean, behind the ramshackle old farmhouse, the unremembered past comes flooding back. And it is a past too strange, too frightening, too dangerous to have happened to anyone, let alone a small boy. 40 years earlier, a man committed suicide in a stolen car at this farm at the end of the road. Like a fuse on a firework, his death lit a touch paper and resonated in unimaginable ways. The darkness was unleashed, something scary and thoroughly incomprehensible to a little boy, and Letty, magical, comforting, wise beyond her years, promised to protect him no matter what. A groundbreaking work from a master, The Ocean at the End of the Lane is told with a rare understanding of all that makes us human, and shows the power of stories to reveal and shelter us from the darkness inside and out. It is a stirring, terrifying, and elegiac fable, as delicate as a butterfly's wing and as menacing as a knife in the dark.
I know it's the second time we've heard that, but that's such a great synopsis. I feel like that's really well written.
It was.
Anyway, so what did you guys think about The Ocean at the End of a Lane? And remember, no spoilers. Lauren, I'm going to let you go first this time.
Yay! I really enjoyed this book. It's been on my must-read list for quite some time, and it's been sitting on my bookshelf for like over a year now. I've been wanting to read it for a long time. It was really short. It was an easy read. I loved Gaiman's writing style, his voice. The formatting was all good. I want to read more of his books now. I think we're slated to read at least one more of his books in the future, and as many more as I have time to read because I just really liked it. Let's see. It had a delicate balance between light and darkness, and it really encompassed the difficult and magical childhood through the child's point of view, which he just did an incredible job of that. I see why it won so many awards. I really, really liked it.
Barbara?
Yeah. So is this your guys' first Neil Gaiman book? I can't remember if you guys have read.
It's my first.
Mine too.
Okay. I mean, he writes beautifully. It's a very beautiful written book. I really enjoyed it. But I did think it was a bit heavy for me. I wasn't expecting that, and I don't think I was in the right mind space for it coming off of The Hogfather. But yeah, I just, it was a little depressing for me, and with the holidays and the year that we've had, I kind of wanted to end on a lighter note, but besides that, it's obviously a very well written book, and I really did enjoy it.
So I guess I should technically clarify. You asked if this is my first Gaiman. It's my first Gaiman book. I've read some of his comics that he's written in the past for Marvel and DC, but I've never read it and one of his actual novels.
Yeah, that doesn't count. Sorry.
Yeah, I assumed it wouldn't count for you, but I wanted to clarify anyway. So anyway, I really like this book. I would even say I loved this book. It was really good. I mean, going into it, I thought wow, this is really short when we first looked at the specs before we started reading it, and I think it was the perfect length. It was really well written. It was a page turner. I didn't want to put it down at times. Like Lauren said, I agree with that. It was perfectly balanced between light and dark, and there were definitely some genuinely creepy dark moments that earned the horror genre that Barbara was talking about before. I really liked it, and the characters were really well written. You really felt like you were there. You felt like you were this little boy going through all this stuff. It was great. I really enjoyed it. So as you guys know, we're obviously not going to go into our individual ratings right now. Got to wait for that. But our group score for this one was an 8.4 out of 10, which is tied for our highest score we've ever given a book with Cinder. Cinder also got an 8.4 out of 10. So next question, like always, would you guys recommend The Ocean at the End of the Lane?
I would 100% recommend this book. It had such depth. I loved the descriptive nature of the writing. He did an amazing job creating a piece of writing that highlights mental health, but also intertwining magic. Like Barbara said, it is kind of dark, but I really like that. I mean, you got to be in the right headspace for it, kind of like you were saying earlier, for sure. But I mean, and I might warn people of that, I guess, just say it's dark, but it's also just I don't know. I would recommend it to almost anybody.
Yeah, I mean, I too would recommend this book, but I would definitely preface it by saying that it may be a bit heavy for some people. Like I mentioned before, I wasn't expecting that going into this book, which I should. Well, I mean, so I've read Coraline and then Stardust. I think it's called Stardust. I believe it's called Stardust. It's Star something. And Coraline is extremely, extremely dark as well, to the point where I was surprised that was a children's book, or it's considered a children's book. But I guess it was just a little bit jarring for me going from The Hogfather, that was such a fun thing to read right around the holidays, to this one. I normally like dark books and stuff like that, but it kind of put me in such a weird headspace that I was just like, man, I was not expecting that to end on that note for my 2020. I think I maybe wanted something a little bit more happier, but I love his writing style and everything, so I would have 100% recommend this to anyone who likes Neil Gaiman, or honestly who hasn't tried it. I think this is a good maybe one to jump into for him.
Absolutely. I'm going to parrot a lot of what they said. I definitely would recommend this book. I can't think of anybody I wouldn't recommend it to, but like Barbara said, I would, and Lauren said, actually, I would definitely, point out hey, Gotta be in the right headspace for this. It is a little bit of a darker book. It does take some darker turns. On that same note, though, I think it's really important and really cool that it highlights some of the mental health issues that Gaiman highlighted in this book. But yeah, definitely kind of a strange way to end 2020, especially after we just finished The Hogfather, which was such a like happy, funny, tongue-in-cheek book, and then going to this, which was an amazing book, but totally different tone. So yeah, 100% recommend it. Recommend it to everybody. Like Barbara said, I think it would be, if you've never read Gaiman, like Lauren and I had never read a book by Neil Gaiman, it's a great way to dip your toe in the water. And for us anyway, it made us both want to read more of his stuff. So maybe that would be the same effect on you.
Yeah, I really want to read Coraline now. Barbara, you said that you have read that one.
Yes, that one's my personal favorite of the three that I've read now so far. I would say Coraline's my favorite. I think Ocean at the End of the Lane is my second, and then the Stardust. I liked Stardust. I really liked the setting and the world and stuff like that, but I didn't like the bad characters as much as I like the bad or the evil villain of like this book. The other one, I like it was good, but I really like this one a little bit, I think. But Coraline is just amazing. I love that book.
I saw the movie, so I'm hoping that doesn't taint my reading of it, but I'm planning on reading it though.
All right, guys. Well, that's part one. For those of you leaving us at this point, don't forget to give us a rating on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or wherever it is you listen to your podcasts. Give us some stars, give us a review. That would really be helpful for us. And also make sure, if you're not already, follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Both places, our handle is @BadassLitPod. We'd love to hear from you. If you've got a book you want us to read, let us know. If you've got something else you want us to talk about, let us know. Hope to see you guys there. Now for a short preview of what's coming up next month from Lauren.
Have a good 2020, you guys.
Yes, if you're leaving us, have a good New Year and beginning of 2021.
Yes. All right, next month we are reading The Cuckoo's Calling by Robert Galbraith, or J.K. Rowling, which was recommended to us by a listener on Facebook, Aubrey Barton. We just wanted to put in a quick editor's note here. The Badass Literature Society does not support discriminatory or hateful speech in any form. We do stand by the LGBTQ plus community and all fans who found a home in the Harry Potter series and work to provide a safe space for the fans. If you, like us, feel impassioned about trans rights, learn more or donate at www.transequality.org. So it's just like a little blip that we wanted to put in. Now here's the preview. After losing his leg to a landmine in Afghanistan, Cormoran Strike is barely scraping by as a private investigator. Then John Bristow walks through his door with an amazing story. His sister, the legendary supermodel Lula Landry, famously fell to her death a few months earlier. The police ruled it a suicide, but John refuses to believe that. The case plunges Strike into the world of multimillionaire beauties, rock star boyfriends, and desperate designers, and it introduces him to every variety of pleasure, enticement, seduction, and delusion known to man. So that's what we have to look forward to.
I'm excited for this book. I've been wanting to read these for a while. Editor's note aside.
I started this one and didn't finish it. So I'm excited to go back and read it again.
I read this 7 years ago.
So you have to brush up on it a bit.
Do what?
I said Barbara's on the ball. You're on it.
Yeah, there's a few that I've
many years ago.
Yeah.
So remember, the second part of our podcast is an in-depth look at this book, The Ocean at the End of the Lane. So if you do want to read it, stop listening right now. Come back when you're done. For those of you sticking around for the spoilers, though, here we go. Okay, so first thing we're doing now, our new segment that Barbara came up with for season 2. Who are we going to give the Badass Character Award to this time? And because it's Barbara's segment, I'm going to let her go first.
Letty Hempstock, hands down.
I second Letty Hempstock.
I third Letty Hempstock. If you've read this book, then you should know that that's pretty obvious. She's the most badass character in the book.
I mean, all the Hempstocks are. All the female characters
True.
are.
That's why I put
Like,
second place would go to Gran because she can solve all the problems.
Yep.
yeah.
So, Letty Henstock, you won the Badass Character Award for this book where you're a
Eh.
fictional character.
Go, Letty. It's your birthday.
So moving on from there, what did you guys like about the book? What did you not like about the book? And was there a specific part of the book where you felt like it really got its hooks in you? And I'm going to let Lauren start first on this one.
Personally, I was hooked instantly. I think the way that he started it off was great with the scene about revisiting the childhood home. He writes with just enough mystery that it made me want to know more pretty much right off the bat. I loved the characters. He did a great job creating this bizarre world that the narrator lives in as a child, and I think it was really reflective of childhood in general and just kind of seeing that through his eyes of a 7-year-old. The only thing I really disliked is that I wanted it to be longer, which I know is contradictory to my usual point of opinions on book lengths. I didn't need 1,200 pages like Michael would choose, but I wanted it to be longer. I wanted to know more about all of the different things. And I obviously disliked some of the feelings that came up for me also while reading it. It definitely, it's been a while since I've read a book where I wanted to jump in and strangle someone. And this was one of those. So, but I did appreciate Gaiman's ability to evoke such emotions from his readers because not every author can do that.
Valid point. So I also really liked this book. I think if I was going to give it just to one thing that I really liked about it, it's the characters. The characters that Gaiman created were amazing. They were believable. The world he put them in was just enough like our own to, get you in there, but then so not like our own to make it incredibly interesting too. I think that I wouldn't say I was hooked from the moment I picked up the book. I was probably hooked from, the big first twist. What was the guy? What was his job? The guy who committed suicide.
I don't know. The same. Just look at my notes and you'll find everything you're saying right there. Just go ahead and just read that word verbatim right there, and you'll have your sayings right there.
He was a coal miner.
I can't see your
He
notes.
was an
Coal miner.
opal miner, actually.
Okay,
Opal
so
miner.
when that happened, that was obviously the big thing in the book, and that got me interested. And if it wasn't that point, it would have been when they introduced the villain, which I think was incredibly well written. As far as dislike, I agree with Lauren. I would have liked it to be longer, hear more of the story. That would have been great. I'm not used to short books like this, so I felt like you kind of got left hanging a little bit at the end without closing everything off. And like Lauren also, I disliked some of the feelings the book gave me, but like she said, it's a testament to his writing when the author can make you feel that strong of feelings towards a character and make you really hate a character like that. So kudos to Gaiman. Barbara?
I really enjoyed the setting. I think Gaiman did a wonderful job at creating this place that was so like our own, but there's hints of more in it, and I love that. Because it's just enough fantasy for people who don't really like fantasy, because it takes place in our world with kind of this hidden society around it. I love the characters. I thought Ursula, or what her actual name was Scarthach of the Keep, was so eerily creepy, and I love a good bad guy, man. If you can hook me with a real good bad guy, I hate when bad guys are just bad guys just because. This one, I feel like she had a really great backstory. I also would have to say the only thing I disliked was just it was a little too short. I enjoy longer books and stuff like that, but I understand why he made it this length. I just wanted to know more about all the characters in this world that we were kind of introduced to, but not really, we didn't get to see much of it. I think the part that really hooked me in was obviously when the narrator was talking about the dead opal miner, and that part was just so creepy. The way he described it, looking through at a 7-year-old's eye and point of view, was just really neat to experience, and really gave you creepy vibes and stuff like that. So that part, I was just yes, let's go. I love this.
Say more about, if you don't mind, why you think that he wanted to make it short. Because I couldn't, I know that he probably did it intentionally, to leave us hanging, or leave you with an unsettled feeling is kind of like what I got from that. But what were your thoughts on that, Barbara?
Why he made it short like that?
Yeah, like what's your theory? Because like mine was that I feel like he wanted you to feel unsettled at the end, like, but I'm just curious what other people think.
So I think originally he said that he wanted this to be like a really short, like he made it like a short story and then kind of turned it into a novel. So I think like originally it was supposed to be like a really short story, like something that wasn't even supposed to be what's considered a novel. And I don't know what the cutoff with that is. I don't know if you guys know if it's like page wise or if it's just you say this is a novel versus this is a short story. I'm not really sure. Um, but I know I was reading about that, and I believe that's what he said. Originally, he had the intention was to be a short story, and then he got convinced by I think his wife, who he wrote the story for, to turn it into a novel. So I think he expanded on it, but I think he intentionally did that because he wanted the reader just kind of to feel like the narrator, like you're this person who gets a little glimpse of this world, but you don't get to know much about it like the narrator did.
That was actually a perfect way to describe that. And then on top of the facts that you gave about him, I looked at some of his other books, Lauren, after noticing this one was so short. A lot of his books are actually around this length. They're a little bit longer. The only exception that I could find was the American Gods series. Those are longer. But even by like long book standards, like because I'm reading a Brandon Sanderson book that's like over 1,000 pages, and his American Gods book is like 350 pages, which is longer than this, but not really long by any
like start. I think I need to Google that before I start butchering this poor book's name. I don't know if it's start, but that one was a short read too. I remember it being very short, and I don't think, it is Stardust. Coraline isn't very long either. Like it's just I think that's his natural way of writing a complete story is that short, which is still great. Like most people, I feel like write 6,000 pages worth of stories, and it's like, okay, this is plenty. You can hack that off a little.
Shots fired at Stephen King for Barbara.
I did not mention him.
It definitely speaks to like just how much of a badass Gaiman is, though, because like being able to package so much like depth into a short book and leave you feeling like you got a full story in such a short amount of time. Like I think I read this in 2 days with an infant, like during nap times. So
yeah, it made it easy to read. That's for sure. That was helpful.
Yeah.
So the next question we've got here is the story juxtaposes the memories of childhood with the present of adulthood. In what ways do you think children perceive things differently than adults? And do you think that there are situations in which a child's perspective can be more quote unquote truthful than an adult's? And I'm going to let Barbara start on this one.
Oh, good. You can parrot me now. I feel like most children just see the world through innocent eyes. Like they don't have these biases yet that most adults do. Like they learn the biases from, their parents or outside friends and family members and just by growing up. And so because of that, like kids just they don't have these outside things clouding their perception or how they look at life. And they just have this non-biased sense. And I really do think that's what it boils down to. I mean, that's why they say kids are so brutally honest because first off, they don't care about anyone's feelings because they haven't learned that yet. That's not a skill that they've learned. Like if you ask a little like 3-year-old, like, oh, hey, sweetie, do I look good in this dress? They're going to be like, no, mom, you got a fat ass. Because that's the truth. Like they're not thinking like, oh, I'm going to hurt mommy's feelings or something like that. And it's the same with like if you show a kid like maybe something they've never seen before, like someone who maybe has 3rd-degree burns on their arms or something, they're going to look kind of like weirded out by it. But then you explain it to them and they'll go give that person a hug and be like, oh, like, I love you. Like, this is so beautiful, that kind of stuff, because they're not like prejudging those people. Like they don't have that yet. And I think that's what it is.
I mean, I also, the first thing I wrote was the children are innocent and unbiased. And I think that's what gives them the truth. I mean, and also the fact that they will tell you, like Barbara said, the cold hard truth. Like if you say, "Oh, how do I look, little Johnny?" and it's like, "Oh, you look kind of fat today, Dad." Like that, they don't care. They're going to tell you the truth, the cold hard truth. I've seen so many funny stories and memes about kids literally. I mean, it's the Bill Cosby show, right? Kids say the darndest things because they don't know any
Ooh,
better. I
bad
know I
mention
mentioned
there.
Cosby,
Ooh,
but
ooh.
good
Yeah.
show.
Another
But
editor's note: we don't support Bill Cosby.
But yeah, this kids see the world the way it is. They see it exactly the way it is. They don't know how to see it any other way. They don't have any of those prejudices built in. They don't have any biases like that, and they'll tell you the cold hard truth. So yeah, I think that a child's perspective was a really, really cool way to tell this story for those reasons.
Take on it kind of comes from my background in psychology too, with my career. But I mean, children see things as they are, but they also see things as they want them to be. Kids have a hard time developmentally distinguishing between like imagination and real life, if that makes sense. And so that's why they are so much better at using their imaginations than you are as an adult. Psychologically, a child's perception of reality is dependent on their upbringing, their mental health, their stage of development, and all those things. Certain children are better at using their imaginations than others for those reasons, especially if there's trauma involved. As far as like children's perspectives being more truthful, I don't like that wording necessarily. Yes, kids like tell it like it is and all of that, but most children don't yet have the capacity for like maliciously manipulating their concept of reality. Their perspective is their truth, whether it's the same as the adult perspective or not. So like if a kid tells you that, you know, there's a monster under his bed, for an outlandish example, like he truly believes that it's there. So that's the truth for them, you know, because their imaginations are vivid and their brains are developing, and that's like their perception of reality. So I think that it's really cool, this novel, because it's almost like, is this a fantasy novel? Like, or how much of this is his imagination versus how much of this is like actual weird witchcraft magic stuff, if that makes sense, you know?
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. I think that's a good way to look at it. I was curious what your perspective would be because of your educational background too. So thanks for touching on that as well. Next question is, one of Ursula Monkton's main attributes is that she always tries to give people what they want. Why is this not always a good thing? What does Ursula want, and how does she use people's desires against them to get what she wants? And Lauren, I'm going to let you start on this question.
I found Ursula's character to be very intriguing. She's sort of portrayed as a baddie, but that she's like innocent in the sense that like she can't help herself in what she's doing, according to the Hempstocks anyway. I feel like it was said a couple different times, like that's just what she is. Like she's a flea, like, and that's what they do, and just kind of saying over and over that she's just giving people what they want, like. And I think that that's to illustrate that even when we get what we think we want, it's not always best for us, I guess, in the grander scheme of things. I also saw her as someone who so desperately like wanted to please others and fulfill that role that she couldn't see reason. Like she's like, but I'm gonna make them happy. Like I'm giving them what they want, when really she's making their lives worse. And the monsters, quote unquote, in this story are so much bigger than just monsters in a fairy tale. Like they're representative of real grown up issues and like vices. And I feel like it's all seen through a 7-year-old's eyes, which is really cool. So I think that Ursula, I hated her. I love to hate her. Just like Umbridge, love to hate her. I think that, I don't know, like I think that she had some innocence too, in this sense, like because of her nature. I don't know if that made any sense, but
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think on this one, at least in the case of Ursula, it's not a good thing that she wants to give everybody what they want because of her ulterior motives. I think, yes, she's innocent to a certain extent, and she thinks that she'll be able to accomplish her goal of like ruling the world by making everyone like her. But when that's the ulterior motive, then that's not good. And I feel like that in most people, when someone is trying to give everybody what they want all the time, like there's probably some ulterior motive there, even if that ulterior motive is just that they're trying to avoid, negativity for themselves and things like that. Like that's still an ulterior motive, and it's not a genuine thing to do. I already answered what Ursula wants. Like she wants to rule the world. She made that one comment that like she had traveled the whole world and found that she was the most powerful being, and I think that kind of showed like a different evil side to her. Like that. I think Lauren mentioned she's innocent, but I think at that moment she exposed that she was not that innocent. Because someone who's innocent and just wants to please people isn't going to travel the world to see if there's any other beings stronger than her. Those are my thoughts on this question, though. Barbara, what do you have?
I mean, this is why I really liked her character. Like Lauren mentioned, she's not your stereotypical like bad person in a fantasy novel. Like normally the bad person in a fantasy novel has like superpowers or something, like they have magic behind them and the hero can't defeat them because of the magic, or like they're super strong or something like that. She literally is just like this thing that wants to appease people, and she does that by giving them what they want. So like really she's just turning people against each other, like that's what she's doing. And I think that's just so interesting because it's not like this here like villain that you see in like the Marvel movies or like this DC movies where like this they're all just like all powerful being and stuff like that. Yeah, she does mention that she's like she wants to be the most powerful being in this human world. But she obviously isn't. I mean, there's other things more powerful than her, like the Hemstocks and the crows or whatever they're called. And I honestly think that she just wants to live in the human world because she thinks that she's the most powerful being in the human world because she obviously isn't in the world that she comes from. So, like, she kind of wheedled her way into the human world to be like, like, I have a footing here. I can take over by just giving people what they want and turning them against each other, which is unfortunately human nature. That's she feeds off of people's desires and gives them what they want, and we turn out to be these awful people once that happens. So that's how she does it, by just controlling them. So I just find that really interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so our next question is we're going to talk about some symbolism in the book. In this case, specifically water. Water has many roles in this story. It can give and take life, reveal, and hide things. How does it play these different roles, and what did you guys think about the symbolism around the water and the ocean in this book? And I will start this one. So I'm mainly going to focus on the ocean because I think that was the biggest symbolism for the water, at least I think. The only other exception being the bathtub that the narrator almost gets killed in. So I think that's what the question's talking about when it's talking about taking life. It's the only thing I can think of anyway of where that was present in the book. But the ocean was this pond in the back of the Hemstock's place, and to me, the ocean symbolized knowledge. Not just knowledge, but like all-knowing knowledge, like cosmic awareness of everything. And I really liked the way that the narrator described that when he eventually gets plunged into the ocean that happens to be in a bucket at that time, and goes over that stuff. So I think that's the big symbolism there for me, like that it's knowledge, and specifically knowledge that at least it was kind of described that only children can attain. So I think it touches on like what Lauren was talking about earlier, that the imagination and the ability to imagine or have a better imagination when you're a kid. So that's what the ocean symbolized there, and then the literal giving life back was the only thing I could think of there was Letty when she gets put into the ocean at the end when they're trying to save her life.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I had written down. So like there's so many metaphors with water in the book that were interesting to me. I think the fixation around the water that played into his childhood trauma also, just because water was something that almost took away his life in the beginning with the experience with his dad. I think the fixation played into his childhood trauma also, about water being something that almost took his life, but then in the end being something that would ultimately heal Letty. This kind of brought his trauma full circle, which I thought was cool, because he had such negative experiences with the water with his dad, to then at the end be able to see that it was also something that had the capacity to heal. So I think Letty showing him the ocean's powers was also a really cool scene, because prior to that, like being submerged in the water was terrifying to him. And then after that, it was like he was opened up to this whole new world of like almost like pleasurable, getting to know things and all of that. So I thought that was really interesting what Gaiman did there.
Kind of just to go off of what you guys like, obviously the take life is the scene that with water perspective that he's pretty much getting drowned by his father. So at that point, like he's scared of water because he almost died drowning. And then later he gets like submerged in this bucket that Letty takes for him to hide. And as soon as he like is all submerged in the water, like he becomes this like all-knowing being that knows everything about the universe, and he has all the answers to it. But he does mention like, because he's like, I want to stay here forever, like I don't want to leave now. And Letty says like, if you stay there too long, you're gonna cease being who you are. So like there, there's this sense of like, yes, like you can be this all-knowing person, but then you're not going to be you, like who you are. And then obviously as far as how the water reveals and hide, that is the part that it reveals because it kind of shows him everything. But it's also Letty uses that water to hide him from the what are they, the hunger birds that are wanting to take him because of the piece of thing that he has in his heart, the Ursula that's still stuck in his heart type thing. So I thought that was really interesting that how the water kind of did all of that for him.
Talk about the stuff of nightmares, the hunger birds. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and the bathtub scene, that like after reading that part of the book, that really stayed with me for a little while. That was hard to read.
After reading that was when I put the book down and I looked at Michael. I was like, this is really depressing. Like I literally had to take a moment and step away from that because it like affected me so much. Like I think I even turned to Michael. I was like, this is a really depressing book. Like
You did.
Yeah, I was like, this is not what I wanted to read during the holidays. Like it's a time to be happy and shit. And like the last thing I want to read is like this, and that's how it affected me. It was crazy.
That was the part that made me like, I was just saying, that was the part that made me want to dive in and strangle someone. Was like, I just couldn't. I was so angry, and I don't think I've been that angry honestly since I read A Child Called It, and that book made me physically sick. So
yeah, that's how I felt when I read like Room.
I haven't read that one.
It's a very good book. That also made me kind of just want to be like, you just kind of feel like the sense of dread and like sick to your stomach feeling.
Yeah.
But all those feelings do also lend to how good of an author Gaiman is to write something that makes you feel that strongly. So there's that too. So was the book the right length? I know we've touched on this a little bit in some of our other comments, but do you guys think the book was the right length? Were there parts you wanted more of? Were there sections you thought should be shorter? What were your opinions on this? And I'm going to let Lauren go first.
Like I kind of touched on earlier, I wanted more out of this book. I wanted to know more about, I wanted to know what came of Letty. I wanted to know more about the other Hempstock women and what the narrator's future held. I wanted to know who the funeral was for. Like there were a lot of unanswered questions for me. So like I was talking about earlier, I ended the book and I just felt unsettled. Like I felt fulfilled by reading it because I felt like I was on this cool journey. So I loved the book, but I wanted more at the end. Even though I liked the length, but I don't know how to describe that. Like I liked the fact that it was short, but I also wanted more about all of those things.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with you on that. I just really enjoyed the fantasy aspect of this book, how he did it. Like it was just the hints of it, like how the grandma like would cut pieces out of the fabric and then sew it back, and that is a form of magic of how they made people forget what happened and how they retold a different story and stuff like that. And you get a hint of the fact that happened to the narrator. Like there's one scenario in one part of the world where he sacrificed himself and he died. And then there's the part that we end up with was he tries to do that, but Letty instead sacrifices herself for him. But he still has that sensation of the first part happening of where he felt himself getting ripped by these vermins, these truth birds or whatever they're called. And that's such an unsettling scene, the way he did that. But it's just like a snippet of that. And it's like the snippet of how his parents forgot, and his dad especially forgot that he pretty much tried to murder his own child because she snipped that out. And I loved that, and I wanted more of that because it's so interesting. Like he writes so well that I was like, I want more of this. So that would definitely just be the thing that I would. And I mean, I get why he made it short. Like I feel like maybe that's why we enjoy the book as it is because of the length. Because sometimes I feel like these other fantasy books that we read are so long that we're always complaining that there's parts that we wanted it shortened or cut and stuff like that. So I feel like this maybe that's why it's done so well because of the length. Um, but I definitely would love to visit more of this world. So if he did like a compendium or something like that, I'd read that in a heartbeat, you know. So I would hate to complain because of the length. So I feel like for the book itself, it was the perfect length. I just wanted, as a greedy reader, I just wanted more.
That last thing, literally those last two sentences were pretty much what I was going to say, which selfishly my answer is, yeah, I wanted more. I wanted more of the story, more of the background on like the Hunger Birds and the magic and the hemp stalks and all that. But I think truthfully, like when you sit down and think about it, like the book was the perfect length, like Barbara said. Like it was perfect. It did leave you hanging on some stuff, and that was intentional. It left you aching for more, and that's not a bad thing. But we're gonna go over the ending more later. But I really liked the way the book ended and how he wrapped things up too. I couldn't imagine adding more on after that after he ended it the way he did. Yeah, so those are my thoughts. Short and sweet. Next question's our staple question. Who was your favorite character and why? And Barbara, I'm going to let you take this one first.
Ooh, my first one. Actually, I don't know.
It's not your first one, but
the first one going first?
No, it's not.
No. I'm just giving you a hard time, Michael.
I know.
So it's always hard for me to pick a favorite character. So that I just did the Hemstocks as a whole. Like, talk about women representative. I feel like the women outshine this book. Like, honestly, as far as men are concerned, we have like three. So you have like the dad who's a douche nugget, but I mean, I guess it's not his fault because Ursula's controlling him. But and then the narrator is obviously a little boy. And then the opal miner who like dies real quick and runs over his cat, so you don't really like him. Like the women are the shining people of this book, and I absolutely love the Hemstocks. I definitely got a sense of like they were a version of the Greek goddess Hecate. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. And I love Greek mythology, so I definitely kind of got a hint of that because she is like the three. I would call it like the three-headed goddess or whatever, but like she has the old crone, which is the grandma Hemstock, then like the mom figure or something like that, the adult version, which is obviously the Letty's quote unquote mom, and then like the young version of her, which is the Letty version. So I definitely got like that sense of that when I was reading this book. So I liked how he threw that in, whether that was intentional of his or who he was portraying or not. I'm not really sure. I just liked how they complemented each other and they were so mysterious and I wanted to know more about them. And I know you guys like the narrator. I just thought he was a bit boring for me. But maybe that's what makes the book good because he's just your run-of-the-mill normal person. Like he's not from this cool world that they are. And he's kind of that's as a reader, you're getting to see everything from his point of view. So I understand why he kind of had to be more of a plain Jane kind of person. And I mean, he wasn't that bad. Like his bravery and stuff and how much he really cared for Letty stood out. So, but definitely the Hemstocks, I think, were my favorite characters as a whole.
So to comment real quick on your thing about Hecate or whatever her name is, Gaiman did intentionally, not Hecate, but the triple goddess. He did intentionally base the Hemstock women on the triple goddess, which is just the pagan version of Hecate, I think.
Right. I mean, it's the same version. Like you know how Roman gods and Greek gods and pagan gods are all kind of have the same basis of who the core god or goddess is. That's probably where he got that from. So
yeah, so he did say that was intentional. He cited the triple goddess from pagan mythology. But so my favorite character was the narrator. I loved the narrator. The way that you got to see him grow throughout the story, the way that Gaiman put you inside the narrator to experience this book as a child. I don't know. I just really liked the way he was written, the growth of the character throughout the book, and it was just a really cool perspective. So that's why I chose the narrator. My close second would not have been the entire Hemstock clan, but I really liked old Mrs. Hemstock. I thought she was at the same time like hugely powerful, but also like felt like a grandma, like a lot of her stuff, and she had a lot of funny one-liners in there too, which were entertaining. I really enjoyed her character too.
My favorite character was the narrator, which is, it just blows my mind that like you get to see like through his eyes on such an intimate level for the entire book, and we don't even know his name. Like crazy.
Yeah. Just the narrator.
I know, yeah, just him. So I felt truly connected to him the entire time I was reading. I know that he was kind of like average or whatever, but then at the same time, like Gaiman writes him in such a way that like you can just like, you feel like I felt like I was him. I was like a 7-year-old living out his story. And so I think just because of the connection that I made with him was why I picked him as my favorite. And then my close second was Letty, just because I just loved her.
See, Barbara, we both liked the narrator.
I know, that's why I even mentioned, I was like, I know both of you guys really liked him.
I'm just giving you a hard time. So, were there any quotes or passages that stood out to you, and why? And I'm going to take this one first, because I only had 2. Lauren has like 8 to go over, so she can go later. So the 2 quotes that really stood out to me, the first one is, grown-ups don't look like grown-ups on the inside either. Outside, they're big and thoughtless, and they always know what they're doing. Inside, they look just like they always have, like they did when they were your age. Truth is, there aren't any grown-ups, not one in the whole wide world. I believe it was Letty who said that, and I thought it was a really interesting way to look at adults, and probably an accurate way to look at adults, especially from a kid's perspective. But I think
so.
I think that's not wrong either. Like, grown-ups just look different on the outside. Like, they're still the same person inside that they were when they were 7 or 8 years old, right? So
I think what it is like when you're a kid, you see these adults and you think like, oh, they have their shit together, or like, oh, they're doing all these stuff, and you can't wait to get to be an adult. And then when you are an adult, you're like, you know what? Like, my parents are just kind of winging this like we are. Like, no one actually knows what the heck they're doing. Like, they just do a better job of pretending, honestly. And you don't realize that until you're an adult, because as a kid, you just think the adults are all knowing and all these powerful beings, and really, they're just as effed up as kids are who don't know what they're doing.
I'm still waiting for the adult fairy to come give me my all-knowing pill, so I can understand like I expected myself to. The other passage that I found that I really liked is, I do not miss childhood, but I miss the way I took pleasure in small things, even as greater things crumbled. I could not control the world I was in, could not walk away from things or people or moments that hurt, but I took joy in the things that made me happy. I thought that was a really poignant quote, just kind of talking about when you're a kid, it's a lot easier to find joy in the little things. And I think as adults, oftentimes we get caught up in the big things and forget about, just taking joy in some of the little things. So I thought that was a really, really good way to say that. I'm going to let Barbara go next because Lauren has to go last and she has like 10 quotes.
I mean, this book was very quotable. Like, I had a bunch of things that I had highlighted and stuff like that, and some similar ones that you guys, or same ones that you guys picked. So I'm not going to repeat all the same ones, but the one that really stuck to me was, this one. It's just, you don't pass or fail at being a person, dear. And it just really stuck with me, because like, as an adult, I feel like you're always trying to like be this perfect version of yourself, and that just kind of made me just really think and just really mull over, like, you're just a person. Like, I'm not going to be graded at the end of my, well, I guess it depends on who you're asking, but I feel like I'm not being graded, there's not an adult teacher waiting to grade my actions. It's just me being a person, and that's all I can be.
You just haven't gotten your grade yet.
Right.
I'm tabulating it as we speak. I had several of the thank you. I had several of the ones that were already said, so let me quickly delete those. So let's see. I really liked. I don't know. I can't say. I probably should have given this a 9. This book, because I really enjoyed it. But you know me. I can't give anybody too much credit. The first one that I put down was adults follow paths, children explore. Adults are content to walk the same way hundreds of times or thousands. Perhaps it never occurs to adults to step off the paths, to creep beneath rhododendrons, to find the spaces between fences. I was a child, which meant that I knew a dozen different ways of getting out of our property and into the lane, ways that would not involve walking down our drive. And I just thought that was really poignant and accurate. I think it's getting better with the new generations as far as adults, taking, out of the box, more of the out of the box thinking. But I do feel like as you get older, you just get in your ways and do things the same way, and you get in a routine, and it's really easy to kind of fall into those routines. So I liked that one. I lived in books more than I lived anywhere else, because I feel like that was me and is me.
Oh, 100%. That quote,
yeah,
got me. I was like, this is me. It's just so true. As a child, that was me.
There was another one that said, and I didn't write it down, but oh no, I did. Books were safer than other people anyway. I liked that too. And then there was a quote that I didn't write down that said about him escaping into books when life got too difficult or too uncomfortable. And so I liked all of those because I could really relate with them. Michael might have already said this one. Nobody looks like what they really are on the inside. Did we talk about that one?
Yes,
okay.
I believe he.
It's a similar quote, Laura.
Well, it's a similar one, I guess. Yeah. So if you want to redo that one.
So nobody looks like what they really are on the inside. You don't, I don't. People are much more complicated than that. It's true of everybody. And I just thought that was valid, just because so often we, judge people by what they look like. And lastly, monsters come in all shapes and sizes. Some of them are things people are scared of. Some of them are things that look like things people used to be scared of a long time ago. Sometimes monsters are things people should be scared of, but they aren't. And that really resonated with me. I think I put the book down at that point and thought about it for a while, because I'm that was where I kind of connected. Okay, Gaiman is doing such a great job of this being seen from a kid's perspective, but also tackling some really big adult themes, because it's talking about vices, things that we should be scared of, but we're not, things that people are scared of or used to be scared of a long time ago, So I just thought that was really good. Anyway, I know I had a lot of quotes, but there were so many good ones.
All right, so moving on from the quotes, this next one's talking about something I thought was kind of an interesting idea. So when the narrative returns to the present, old Mrs. Hemstock tells our narrator, "You stand, two of you lot, next to each other, and you could be continents away for all it means anything." What does she mean by this? Why is it, quote unquote, easier for people, our narrator especially, to forget certain things that are painful to reconcile? And I'm going to let Barbara go first again.
I think it's because people don't like to relive traumatic or difficult experiences. It's just much easier to lock those memories away and really only have to access them if you really need to. And I don't know if it's easier. I think that's just a human nature. You don't want to go your whole life just living those memories, so you just kind of brush it away. And then there's points in times when you're stressed or anxious or anything like that, where they kind of bubble up and surface up because it's harder to keep them repressed. I don't know. That's all I've got for that.
From a psychology standpoint, again, trauma physically alters brain chemistry. Brain scans have been done on people who have trauma versus those who don't. It's super interesting. Different centers in the brain are affected by trauma. And so people alter their memories and their perceptions of the past based on their current ability to cope with the feelings that are associated with those events. So, a lot of times in people with trauma, especially kids, trauma in childhood as they grow up, memory will be affected. And if you scanned their brain, the memory center of their brain, is physically altered from trauma. And so, like Barbara kind of said, like also it's, it's easier to suppress or repress traumatic memories, but a lot of times people literally can't bring those memories up themselves. Like they'll need to utilize something like EMDR therapy or other things to even reveal what was happened, because it's been so far buried in their subconscious mind. So
something just
sorry, I just
clicked for
got
me.
super technical.
That's okay. That's your background. Something just clicked for me while Lauren was saying that. Essentially, what we do as humans to repress painful memories and try to forget them is what the hempstocks do with magic when they snip things out of people's memories. And I don't know if that was an intentional connection or not, but that is kind of what they're doing. Like when she goes through and she snips out the fact that the narrator's dad tried to drown him in the tub. That's not repressing. They're literally getting rid of it, but it's not that different from repressing a painful or traumatic memory.
Well, yeah, the grandma employee, the old hemstock, she even asks the narrator, she's like, "Do you want me to remove that from your memories?" And he goes, "No, because at the end of the day, they're still my memories."
Yeah, I think that he did that intentionally, and I don't know what Gaiman's background is in psychology or any of that, but how I kind of read that with the hemp stocks is like, and this goes back to whether I still don't know whether this was written like, okay, it's his imagination or how he's perceiving things, or if it's actual magic happening. But he perceived that family that helped him, like they were, they were fixing they were like helping him fix his memory with the stitching or whatever, but also because they were the people that were showing him care and all of that, like in his physical remembrance of all of that, it kind of replaces and remedies that trauma. So like her cutting that out of his mind, or of his whatever fabric that they were unstitching or restitching, basically allowing him to not have to live with that anymore is kind of the symbolism of the hemstocks being able to fix everything.
Definitely an interesting question. I'm glad that Chloe has that. Next one's much easier and more surface level. Would you read another book by Neil Gaiman? Lauren.
Yes, I'm looking forward to reading more Gaiman in the future. I want to read Coraline. I think we're reading The Sleeper and the Spindle sometime in the future. So there's going to be more Gaiman in my future for sure.
Me too. I have American Gods, the book and the graphic novel. I want to read the graphic novel. Probably read that first, then the book maybe. I also really want to read Gaiman's Sandman comic series. I have never read that, and I've always wanted to, so I want to read that as well. I know Barbara said that doesn't count as a book, but I still would like to read it. So,
I mean, it doesn't count as a book because it's not a book. That's why it's called a graphic novel. So, obviously, I would read other books I already have before this run. And I enjoyed all his the previous two that I had originally read. Like I absolutely am obsessed with Coraline. I loved that book, and I forgot that when I read it, I had I want to say rented. Is that the correct term? Checked
Borrowed.
out. I checked out from the library, so I don't have a copy of that book. And I thought I had Stardust because I could have sworn I bought that, but I don't see it on my bookcase. So maybe I checked out both of them from the library because I mean back then when I was a kid I didn't own books. I always had to go to the library instead. So I kind of want to be like, I need these in my collection because I really do enjoyed his books and definitely would read more of his books, and I want to read more of his books. It's in my vast library of to be read books of I think I have like 1,000 at this point. So of course I would read more.
let's get a little deeper again after that one. You're okay. Was the ending satisfying? What did you guys think of the ending? I'm going to start with Barbara.
It's like yes and no. I enjoyed the ending. I feel like it said a lot without saying a lot, if that makes sense. But I just wanted more of the whole story. So like when the book ended, I was like, oh, what? I need more. I want more. Plus, like the ending was just so gut wrenching. Like to know that the narrator doesn't remember anything that happened to him, unless he's by Letty's quote unquote ocean, her little pond. It's just kind of really sad. And the ending really just affected me. Like I was just, man, I don't know. I just wasn't in the right headspace after I finished it. And but I feel like that's when you know it's a good book, with how it affects you that way. And unfortunately, I just was not looking to feel these emotions right around the holidays. And I think that's probably why I gave it a lower score than I did, because I remember like reading it and having to stop a few times because I normally read during my lunch at work, and I just did not. I could not be in that headspace when I was working. Like I could not just. I would have to stop and just be like, okay, like now back to work, and it was kind of just hard because of what was going on. And just with the holidays, I tend to like I tend to kind of be, which is funny because I tend to be a negative person, or at least I don't call it negative. Michael likes to call it negative, but I tend to be a realist. I call it a realist. Like I'm a realist. And like during the holidays, mostly Christmas, on just Christmas is like when I kind of get more of like that giddy sense of being a kid again, because it just reminds you of childhood and all that stuff. And so like reading this just kind of put like this sour taste in my mouth because it was everything opposite of the holidays. It's like traumatic and depressing and beautiful and all of these things wrapped up in this one like 180-page book. And it really got to me. And I don't think I wanted to finish off what turned out to be such a shit year with everything going on. Like I felt like maybe I should have read this first and then The Hogfather, and maybe I would had given this a higher score, because like as soon as I put this book down, I turned to Michael and I was like, I don't know what to score this because it's so beautiful. It's done so well, but it affected me so like weirdly that I wasn't expecting it, that like I have this like weird taste in my mouth after reading it, you know?
What an appropriate way, though, to end 2020 as far as like talking about like reflecting on trauma, and especially for kids like this year. I mean, I just would, it will be interesting in my line of work to see how the pandemic affects the mental health of all of these kids going forward, and just to see kind of like from their perspectives how this even looks, like what kind of realities they've had to create, kind of like the narrator did, in order to cope with what's going on in the world. It's just crazy. But
yeah, it would be like one of those things where I'm sure they've back then like studied like during world wars or civil wars and that kind of stuff, like how that affected kids, because you don't hear about that in school. You only hear how it affected the government or like the country, but you don't hear like individual stories of kids who grew up with this kind of stuff. Like obviously
yeah,
it's life changing. Like this is not normal. That
yeah.
it's not normal.
And developmentally, I mean, and this is a soapbox that I'll only be on for 2 seconds, but developmentally, it's kids need, they need social interaction in order to, like, literally in order to grow their brain, especially the younger ones. Like the middle and high schoolers need it for other reasons, but the young ones are still like forming brain synapses and all kinds of things, and they just, it's not the same. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. To answer the question, the ending was unsettling for me. I think that was by design, kind of like I said earlier. I think that you're meant to finish this book and feel unsettled. It's not a neat happy ever after tale. I would have loved to have had more of everything: the Hemstocks, the narrator's future, the figuring out who the hell's funeral they're at. But at the same time, I think that the way he ended it was really poignant and impactful, and also, like Barbara said, like really sad. Just the fact, I would have liked to have seen him come to terms with some of the things from his childhood, and to see some growth there as far as like making peace with things. But the fact that he's still living in that repressed state as an adult and doesn't remember it really kind of bummed me out too. But then at the same time, I put it down and I was like, man, that was like a really beautiful piece of literature. So it was like, it left me in the weird headspace, but at the same time, I was so appreciative of his writing, and also just surprised that I have not read any of his books yet.
So for me, the ending was amazing. I loved the way that he finished the book, as mind bending as it was. Like it was just like there was so many twisty stuff that you had to kind of go back and think about that happened in the last little bit of the book. Like when he's sitting there talking to Mrs. Hemstock, and she mentions that he always he's like, I always seem to come back here when it's a hard time in my life, and she says that he's coming back because Letty is like somehow summoning him back so she can see if her sacrifice was worth it and if he's living a good life. And that's actually when Barbara's quote comes in, where she reminds the old Mrs. Hemstock reminds him that you're not graded on how to be a person, right? Was that close, Barbara, to your quote?
Well, it's because he asked, like, oh, like, how did I do? And I believe it's actually not old Mrs. Hemstock, it's Lady Hemstock. I forgot. I think her name is actually in the book. Yeah, and she goes, you're not, like, there's no grade for being a human.
So you have that happen, and then she's also reminding him that, like, hey, nobody, what he remembers is probably the truth, but nobody remembers things the same, and exposes that, you know, what actually might have happened was that the Hunger Birds ate the narrator's heart, and she removed that from his memory so he didn't have to remember that pain, and that was kind of crazy. And then to top all of that off, when the book finally does end, like the last little bit of him leaving their farm, he says, hey, say hi to Letty next time she writes from Australia, as if he's just forgotten everything that he just talked about.
Oh, 100%. He already forgot.
And it was such a good ending, and it was so just mind-bending. And I'm going to compare it to a movie, like a Christopher Nolan movie, like Inception or something like that, a movie where you have to look at it and be like, wow, hold on, what just happened? And I feel like this was kind of twisty in the same ways that those are twisty. But yeah, I really liked the ending. Is the gist of everything that I just said.
Oh, the mom's name is Ginny Hemstock.
Thank you. I could not remember her name. Last question, guys. What did you think of the setting and world building in the book? Did you enjoy it? Did you want more of it? And I'm going to let Lauren start on this one.
I enjoyed the world building. I feel like Gaiman did such a good job of describing the various settings, and just doing that through the eyes of a child without breaking character takes some true talent. Like, I never felt that I wasn't exploring the world through the eyes of a kid. Like, and that's hard to do, I think, as a writer. I loved all the little nuances that were mentioned, like the freaking Hunger Birds or whatever they're called, and just all like the rug, like the flying furry rug thing with teeth. I would have liked to have had them fleshed out a bit more, but that's just a petty gripe. I loved the fact that I was able to really transport myself to the lane where they lived and really experience each of the settings for myself. So maybe that's why I liked the narrator's quote so much about escaping into books. I've always done that my whole life. Some books are easier to allow yourself to be fully engrossed in, and I feel like this was one of those books for me where, like, when I was reading it, everything else was just like not even there. Like, there was at one point that I had to start reading this book after I put my daughter to bed, because I was not focusing on like paying attention to her. I was just so engrossed. So I was like, I guess this is going to be an after bedtime book, because I need to, be able to kind of just jump in. So
yeah, I really enjoyed it too, and I really enjoyed what he gave us as far as the world building, but I was definitely craving more of it, and I think that's just a testament of how he wrote. Like, I feel like with Stephen King, it's like, okay, enough's enough, dude. Like, but with this one, I was just like, more, like crack cocaine, give me more. I wanted to know more about this magical world that he created and that was hiding in plain sight to ours. And I just wanted more of the creepy creatures that we got hints of, or even the cool creatures like his magical cat that he had. And the Hemstocks obviously are these magical beings, and I want to know more about their background. Gaiman did a beautiful job of creating and describing it so easy or it was so well that it was just really easy for me to picture everything in my mind's eye. Like how Lauren said, like when I'm reading a book, like I pictured the scene happening. Like I'm a visual person, so like when I'm reading it, I'm not as quick of a reader like Michael. I feel like he reads books through stuff, but I feel like he misses out on picturing these things in his head. Because that's what I do. And sometimes like when I really enjoy something, I'll like go back and reread it. Like it would be like you would be like rewinding a scene in a movie or something because you really enjoyed it, you know? So it's like I would want to like replay it after the fact. Or sometimes when I'm done reading a book, I'll just keep thinking of a scene like over and over again, and I have it like in my mind's eye. And he does such a good job that it's easy as a reader to picture these things because he does a good job of it. So yeah, I just love that he helped me create those scenes in my head and made a beautiful reading experience.
So short and sweet answer for me on this. I loved it.
You have no answer.
Gaiman masterfully built this world, starting from, hey, this is our world, it's normal Earth, and then slowly throughout the book pulling us deeper and deeper into this fantasy world within our world that was existing. That was really cool and well done. So kudos to
like
Gaiman.
How Lauren was like, the scene where he's pulling like Ursula's like worm figure out of his foot. Like I was just like so engrossed in that. I was like, because I love that kind of crap. Like as a donor, like you kind of have to. Oh man, I love that. I was like, yes, that's so satisfying. Like you pull that shit.
My stomach turned reading that. It was so descriptive. The wormhole. And oh my gosh, like I could picture it and I was sick. Like, I think I texted the group and I was like, what are we doing?
I was like, honestly, like your experience with that is completely different with mine because I enjoyed that. And I was like, man, I'm quite impressed with a 7-year-old kid able to like do that so well, and the thought process of how to get this nasty ass thing out of your foot is just like kudos to him. Like I was like, yes, get that worm boy.
You like Dr. Pimple Popper though, don't you?
I mean, as a career path, I love that crap. So like, yeah, of course that like whenever we had patients coming in, it was like, oh hey, I've got like some stuff, and I'm like, yeah, like sign me up. I'll frickin' I volunteer as tribute.
Well, guys, we made it. Let's talk about our individual scores. We're just going to go in order here as how it is in the notes. I'll let Barbara go first. Barbara, what did you give this one?
So to preface my score, it's going to sound really low. I gave it a 7.5, but in my defense, my highest scored book is an 8. So really this is second. It's literally second best. So it's not, I don't think it's that low of a score when you look at it that way. Like I've never given any books a 9 or a 10 or anything above an 8. So I'd say this is kind of right there with those that I've scored, and that I kind of just wanted to give a little reasoning behind that because I didn't want people to think, oh, 7.5 is really low, but like it's a second highest book that I've rated. So
there you go. Lauren, what about you?
I gave it an 8.8. I should have given it a 9. Like I really, really enjoyed this book, and it was really well written. And overall, I really enjoyed it. I'm going to read some more Gaiman after this for sure.
I gave it an 8.75, pretty highly rated. For me, the highest score I've given is a 9, which I've only given to 2 books. This one wasn't quite that caliber, but I loved it. I loved the book, so I gave it an 8.75. And that made our group average an 8.4 out of 10, which, like I said at the beginning, is tied for our highest rated group score of any book we've read, other than Cinder. Cinder's the same one that it's tied with. So, well, guys, we've reached the end. Thanks so much for listening. Like always, we are Badass Literature Society. Hopefully you liked this episode. If you did, let us know. Get on Apple Podcasts, get on Spotify, wherever you're listening to your podcast. Give us a rating, give us a review. That'd be super helpful for us to be seen and for other people to find our podcast. If you're not already, follow us on Instagram and Facebook. In both places, our handle is @BadassLitPod. And with that, we'll see you guys next month. I'm Michael.
I'm Barbara.
And I'm Lauren.